I was hauled to the king in chains, until he witnessed me drop his court to their knees. The city seemed to hold its breath as Lyra was dragged through the cobblestone streets, her wrists bound with thick iron chains. Her dark cloak was torn at the edges, and her hair whipped across her face with every shove from the guards. She did not cry out, nor did she resist, though her eyes blazed with fire that refused to be tamed. Rumors of her deeds had traveled far and wide. Some said she had defied the king's orders. Others whispered that she had dared to challenge the court itself. Whatever the truth, she had been captured, and now she was being brought to the great hall of King Eric, the ruler whose very presence could silence a room. The guards shoved her forward, and the massive doors of the throne hall loomed before her. Even chained, she moved with a dignity that made some of the courtiers glance at her uneasily. King Eric sat upon his throne, tall and imposing, his armor gleaming faintly in the pale morning light that filtered through the high windows. His expression was unreadable, but his piercing gray eyes studied Lyra as if she were both a threat and a mystery waiting to be solved. The hall was vast, filled with nobles and advisors, all whispering among themselves. The air felt heavy, thick with tension. When Lyra entered, a hush fell over the room. The clatter of her chains echoed loudly, marking each step she took. A courtier muttered, "She's bold to walk in here like that. Does she not fear the king?" Another replied, "Fear is for the weak." "Look at her eyes. She doesn't just walk, she challenges us all." Lyra's gaze never wavered. She held her head high as the guards threw her to her knees before the throne. Her chains scraped against the marble floor, sending sparks of anger and defiance into the cold air. She was tired, bruised, and chained, but she had not lost her will. King Eric's eyes narrowed slightly, and a faint shadow crossed his stern features. He had seen many prisoners, many rebels, many liars, but there was something different about her. Something in her presence tugged at a part of him he had long buried, a curiosity, a spark of recognition, or perhaps a challenge he could not yet name. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice calm but cutting, "that dares to appear before me in chains and without fear?" Lyra lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. "I am Lyra. I am no one's puppet, not even yours, your majesty." Her words were firm, her tone steady. They carried a weight that made the room shift uncomfortably. The courtiers snickered nervously. Some were offended by her audacity, others were unsettled by it. For all their power, no one had dared speak to the king like that in years. King Eric leaned forward slightly. "And why should I believe your defiance has any merit? Or are you merely a fool seeking attention?" Lyra's voice was soft but clear, carrying a quiet authority. "Because, my king, the court is full of lies, and your people suffer while you are told only what flatters your ears. I have seen the truth, and I will not bow to shadows pretending to be loyal." The hall erupted into whispers and murmurs. The king's advisors exchanged uneasy glances, their faces pale. To speak such words openly was dangerous. To survive after speaking them was impossible. Yet here she was. Eric studied her, his expression a mixture of intrigue and caution. He rose slowly, his presence commanding the room. Even in his imposing armor, he seemed almost like a dark force of nature, every movement deliberate, every gesture full of authority. He circled her, silent, examining her as one might study a rare and dangerous creature. Then, abruptly, he stopped, his gaze fixed on a small, glowing mark on Lyra's wrist, partially hidden by her chains. A subtle shimmer pulsed there, a sign that many would not notice, but he did. "You carry a mark," he said softly, almost to himself, "one that has not appeared in generations. Tell me, what is it?" Lyra glanced at it and then back at the king. "A mark of fate," she replied, her voice low. "It tells a story older than any court you have ever ruled. It warns of corruption, of shadows that grow stronger when ignored, and it calls for change." The court gasped. Few understood what she meant, but the weight in her words made them tremble. Some, who had long manipulated the kingdom for their own gain, looked suddenly uneasy. King Eric's eyes darkened. He had heard rumors of this mark before, of its power and danger. Many had sought it and few survived to tell the tale. Yet now here it was, on a woman who stood defiant even in chains. He could feel her power, not fully understood yet, stirring something deep within him. "Very well," he said finally, his voice loud enough for the whole hall to hear. "You will not be executed immediately. Instead, you will answer for your claims. If you speak truth, you may yet prove your worth. If you speak lies, your chains will not protect you." Lyra's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. Even in chains, she had the upper hand, not in strength, perhaps, but in spirit. She was escorted to a small chamber adjacent to the throne room, where she was left under guard. The king's eyes lingered on her as the door closed. He did not understand why he was drawn to her, or why her presence unsettled him so deeply. There was defiance, yes, but also something unyielding, almost magnetic in her strength. That evening, Lyra sat quietly on the cold stone floor of her chamber, the chains a constant reminder of her captivity. Yet she did not despair. Instead, she thought of what lay ahead. She had seen the court's corruption, and she knew she had the power to reveal it. Not by sword or fire, but by courage and cunning. A faint shimmer pulsed on her wrist again, reminding her of the prophecy she barely understood. She was not merely a prisoner, she was a catalyst, and she would act, no matter the cost. The next morning, King Eric summoned her to the hall once more. The court assembled, curious and wary, for they had heard of her previous defiance. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some called her a hero, some called her mad. Eric sat silently on his throne, watching as Lyra approached. When she knelt, she did not lower her eyes. She met his gaze directly, unbroken. "Today," the king said, "you will speak. You will tell me what you know of the corruption in my court, and we shall see whether your words are truth or treachery." Lyra lifted her head, letting the light of the hall catch her features. "Your court hides many secrets, your majesty," she began. Lies whispered in halls meant for loyalty, treachery masked as counsel, people suffering in silence while those sworn to protect them lined their pockets and hearts with greed. The courtiers shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, others tried to mask their fear with false smiles. Lyra's words were like arrows piercing through layers of pretense. King Eric's expression remained unreadable, though inside, a storm brewed. He had trusted many, too many. And yet this woman, chained and seemingly powerless, dared to confront him with truths he had long suspected but feared to name aloud. Before anyone could respond, a sudden movement caught the attention of the hall. One of the chief advisors, a man long thought loyal, clutched his chest and staggered back, his face contorted in pain. The courtiers gasped. No visible weapon had struck him. No one had touched him. Lyra remained calm, almost serene. She glanced at the man briefly, her eyes flashing with a strange light. The mark on her wrist pulsed more brightly than ever. A faint hum filled the hall, barely audible, yet impossible to ignore. King Eric's eyes widened. He had never seen magic in action before, not so raw, so undeniable. His jaw tightened and the room seemed to shrink around him. Lyra spoke softly, almost a whisper, yet her voice carried through every corner. "Power hides in truth, your majesty. Those who betray it will fall, even if you do not strike them yourself." The hall fell silent. Every noble, every guard, every advisor felt the weight of her words. Something ancient, something powerful was stirring within her. And the king could not look away. Finally, Eric broke the silence. His voice was low, but it carried authority. "You are unlike any prisoner I have known, Lyra, and unlike any threat I have faced. If your power is real, if your courage is true, then perhaps you are the key to what this kingdom needs." Lyra's lips curved slightly. Even in chains, she held her strength. She had arrived in the king's hall as a captive. Yet in that moment, the balance of power began to shift, just slightly in her favor. And as the king's gaze lingered on her, long and calculating, a quiet realization passed through the court. The game had only just begun. Cliffhanger. That night, as the city slept, a shadow moved across the hall of the palace. A secret ally of the court's corrupt advisor whispered into the darkness, "She cannot remain alive, not if she exposes the truth." And somewhere in the shadows, Lyra's mark pulsed brighter, sensing danger before it arrived. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the throne hall, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Lyra stood before King Eric, still under watchful eyes of the court, though her chains had been removed. The faint bruises on her wrists were a reminder of yesterday's arrival, but they did not dampen the fire in her gaze. She held herself tall, proud, aware that every glance in her direction was filled with curiosity and caution. King Eric's voice cut through the murmurs. "Lyra, I will give you a chance to speak. If what you claim is true, we will act. If it is false, the consequences will be yours alone." His eyes, sharp as steel, locked onto hers. There was no cruelty in his words, only authority. Lyra's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Truth cannot be measured by fear, Your Majesty. It can only be spoken, and then it will reveal itself." The king nodded once. "Very well, speak." Her gaze swept across the hall. "Your court is divided, not by loyalty to the kingdom, but by loyalty to themselves. Many who claim to serve you have their own ambitions. They whisper lies to maintain power. They take what should belong to the people. They weaken your rule from within while pretending to be faithful." A low murmur ran through the room. The courtiers shifted uneasily, some exchanging frightened glances. One by one, their faces betrayed the knowledge that Lyra was speaking truths they wished had remained hidden. King Eric raised a hand. "Name them," he said calmly, though the steel in his voice made it clear that he expected honesty. "Name the ones who betray me." Lyra took a deep breath. "The chief advisor, Gavrin, who stands there," she said, her voice steady as she pointed toward the older man in a dark cloak. "He has been experimenting with forbidden magic. He believes he can control the people and the kingdom for his own gain. And yet he smiles as if loyal to you." Gasps echoed through the hall. Gavrin's eyes widened, but his lips remained pressed into a thin line. He had not expected his secret to be revealed, not yet. King Eric's eyes flicked to Gavrin. The man had served him for decades, but Eric had always sensed something was off. Now, Lyra confirmed his suspicions with words as sharp as any blade. "She will speak truth, Your Majesty," Gavrin said, his voice shaking slightly. "She knows nothing of real power. She is a prisoner of her own delusions." Lyra laughed softly, a sound that carried authority. "I know enough to see through lies, and that is more than many here can say." Eric studied her silently. He could feel the tension in the room, the fear, the unease. The court was a dangerous place, full of people who thought loyalty could be bought, who would betray without hesitation. Yet here was Lyra, standing alone, unafraid, commanding attention even in a room full of nobles. "Very well," Eric said after a long pause. "I will give you a challenge. You will expose the corruption in this court. You will reveal the truth that has been hidden for too long. If you succeed, you will earn your freedom. If you fail," his gaze hardened, "you will answer for your actions." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of a smirk on her face. "And how do you wish me to do this, Your Majesty? By speaking alone or by proving it through action?" "You will act," he replied. "I will watch, and so will my court. The truth must be undeniable." The days that followed were tense. Lyra moved through the halls of the palace with purpose, quietly observing, listening, and piecing together the threads of deception. She discovered hidden alliances, secret meetings in shadowed corridors, and the quiet suffering of the people who depended on the king's rule. One evening, she entered a small library filled with ancient tomes and scrolls. Here she could study the kingdom's history, the rules of magic, and the old prophecies that seemed to speak directly to her. The faint glow of her mark pulsed on her wrist as she touched a dusty tome, and visions flickered before her eyes, images of shadows rising, of a kingdom in turmoil, and of a power that could be wielded only by one with courage and wisdom. Her mind raced. She realized that her role was greater than she had imagined. She was not merely a prisoner or a rebel. She was a key to uncovering the darkness that threatened Erendor, a force capable of challenging the corruption that had taken root. At the same time, King Eric watched her closely. He had ordered his guards to report her movements, but he also observed her personally. There was a strange pull in his chest whenever he saw her act with authority, whenever he saw her courage in the face of danger. He did not fully understand it, and he did not want to, and yet he could not look away. One afternoon, the king summoned the court for a council meeting. Lyra was present, standing among the advisors, now freed of chains, her mark visible but not glowing as brightly. She had learned much in the past days, and now she was ready to act. The council began as usual, with Gavrin speaking first, his voice confident, his eyes smug. "The kingdom is stable, your majesty," he said. "There is no need for change. All is well." Lyra stepped forward. "All is not well," she said. "Your advisors hide truths from you. They twist your words. They manipulate the people." The room erupted into whispers. Some of the nobles leaned forward, eager to hear more. Others scowled, offended by her audacity. "Prove it," Gavrin said, sneering. "You are just a woman without power. What can you possibly show us?" Lyra's eyes flashed. She raised her hand slightly, and the mark on her wrist pulsed with a soft light. Without any visible force, Gavrin suddenly clutched his chest and stumbled backward, gasping as if struck by a hidden blow. The courtiers screamed and scrambled, unsure what had happened. King Eric's eyes widened. He rose to his feet, his gaze locking on Lyra. "What did you do?" he demanded, though his voice contained no anger, only awe and disbelief. "I merely revealed the truth," Lyra said softly. "The power that hides in lies can be countered by the courage to speak them. The magic I carry responds to the corruption, nothing more." The hall fell silent. Every noble, every advisor, every guard felt the weight of her words. Something ancient and powerful was stirring within her, a force that could no longer be ignored. Eric stepped closer. "Your power is undeniable," he said, his voice low. "But power without control is dangerous. Are you prepared to use it wisely?" Lyra met his gaze. "I am prepared to use it to restore justice," she replied. "Not for myself, not for glory, but for the people who have suffered while your court deceived you." The king studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Very well, you will continue. Expose the corruption. Bring me the truth, no matter how difficult it may be to hear. But beware, there are those who will stop at nothing to maintain their control." Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. "I expected nothing less, your majesty." In the days that followed, she worked quietly, meeting with loyal servants, observing secret passages, and piecing together the web of lies spun by the court. Each revelation brought her closer to her goal, but also deeper into danger. The corrupt advisors whispered in shadows, plotting against her, trying to anticipate her moves. Yet Lyra was not afraid. Her mark pulsed when danger was near, warning her of traps and schemes before they were set in motion. She had learned to trust her instincts, and they had never failed her. Meanwhile, the tension between her and King Eric grew. He watched her closely, sometimes silently, sometimes with a question in his eyes. She challenged him in ways no one had ever dared. He admired her courage, feared her power, and was drawn to her presence in ways he did not fully understand. One evening, during a council meeting, Lyra made her most daring move yet. She revealed evidence that one of the king's most trusted advisors had been secretly hoarding supplies meant for the people, and had been using forbidden magic to manipulate the king's decisions. The court gasped. The accused advisor turned pale, realizing that he had been caught. Some courtiers whispered in fear, others in awe, and Lyra stood tall, her eyes blazing, her mark glowing faintly. King Eric's expression was unreadable, but inside he felt a storm of emotions. He admired her courage, and he could feel the truth of her words. The court had been shaken, and the balance of power was beginning to shift. Cliffhanger. As the court reeled from her revelations, a faint shadow flickered along the walls of the hall, unseen by most. Lyra's mark pulsed brighter, sensing danger approaching. Somewhere in the shadows, the chief advisor whispered a warning to his secret allies. She cannot be allowed to live. She will destroy us all if she continues. Lyra's eyes narrowed, aware that the real battle was only beginning. The palace of Urindor seemed quieter now, but the silence was tense. Behind closed doors, plots shifted. Whispers of betrayal passed from one shadow to another, and Lyra moved like a storm through the halls. She was no longer the chained prisoner who had arrived weeks ago. Her chains were gone, but her spirit had grown stronger, sharper, more unyielding. King Eric watched her every step. He could not deny it. Lyra had changed the rhythm of his court, the pulse of his kingdom, and even the cadence of his thoughts. He admired her courage, yet he could feel a subtle unease whenever she was near. She challenged him in ways no one else dared. She forced him to see truth without filter, to confront the shadows in his kingdom and sometimes in himself. One morning, Lyra walked into the council chamber, her mark pulsing faintly on her wrist. Her eyes scanned the gathered advisors and nobles, many of whom avoided her gaze, uneasy under the weight of her scrutiny. Today, she intended to confront them openly, not with magic alone, but with words that carried the force of justice. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice steady, commanding attention even in the presence of the king. "The kingdom is at a crossroads. Those who should guide you have instead misled you. Their actions harm the people, weaken your rule, and invite disaster." Gavrin, the chief advisor, sneered. "And what proof do you have, prisoner? You speak in riddles and shadows, hoping we will tremble." Lyra's eyes narrowed. She raised her hands, and a subtle glow emanated from her mark. It was not a threat, it was a signal, a symbol of her authority and the truth she carried. Without touching him, Gavrin staggered, clutching his side as if struck by unseen force. The room gasped. Some courtiers stumbled back, fear etched into their faces. King Eric's voice cut through the silence. "Enough," he commanded, yet he did not order her to stop. Instead, he observed her closely, his gaze a mixture of caution and admiration. He could feel her power, not fully understood, yet undeniable. Lyra spoke again, softer this time, but with a resonance that filled the hall. "I am not here to harm you, Your Majesty. I am here to restore what has been hidden, to reveal the truth that your court seeks to keep from you. And if you stand with me, we can save this kingdom together." The council murmured. Some were visibly shaken, others tried to mask fear with arrogance. Yet the tension in the room was palpable. No one had ever dared confront the court so openly, and certainly not with proof so undeniable. King Eric rose from his throne. He did not speak at first, simply studying her. He could feel the weight of her words, the power in her presence, and the courage that radiated from her every action. For the first time in years, he felt a spark he had long buried, the desire to see the truth, not just what his advisors told him. "Lyra," he said finally, his voice steady but low, "you have shown strength and courage beyond most. But power can be dangerous when wielded without caution. Can you control it? Can you use it to guide rather than destroy?" Lyra met his gaze without flinching. "I do not seek to destroy, Your Majesty. I seek to reveal, to restore what has been hidden, to protect those who cannot defend themselves. My strength is not for me, it is for the kingdom." Eric studied her, the pull between them growing more complex. He admired her fearlessness, yet feared her power. He felt drawn to her in ways he could not name, and he resented the pull even as it grew stronger. Days passed, and Lyra's investigation continued. She moved through hidden corridors, observed secret meetings, and uncovered alliances that threatened the stability of the kingdom. Each discovery brought her closer to her goal, but also deeper into danger. The corrupted advisors whispered in shadows, plotting against her, trying to anticipate her moves, but she was always one step ahead. One evening, she returned to the library, where the old tomes held knowledge of the past, of magic, and of prophecies long forgotten. Her mark pulsed stronger now, responding to the darkness that lingered in the court and the kingdom. She traced her fingers over the pages, absorbing knowledge that felt older than time itself. She realized her role was more critical than she had imagined. She was not merely a witness to corruption. She was a force that could bring change, a catalyst for justice. Meanwhile, King Eric observed from afar. He often found himself lingering near her, sometimes watching quietly, sometimes unable to resist listening to her speak. He could feel a strange tension growing between them, an unspoken connection that neither wanted to acknowledge, yet could not deny. One day, Lyra returned to the throne hall during a council meeting. The room was filled with nobles, their expressions guarded, their whispers subdued. She stepped forward and raised her voice so that every ear could hear. "The people suffer while you plot and scheme," she said. "They are hungry, their homes unsafe, their lives manipulated. And yet you sit here, pretending loyalty, while corruption grows around us like a poison." The hall went silent. Some courtiers tried to protest, but her words cut through their defenses. They could see the truth in her eyes, and even those who had not fully understood before now felt the weight of her statements. Gavrin's face turned pale. He realized the tide was turning, and he could no longer rely on fear or secrecy to maintain control. His whispers had been exposed, his plans revealed, and the court's power was slipping. King Eric remained seated, though he was tense. He knew she was right. Her courage had exposed what he had long suspected, yet he had been too cautious to act. Now, with her guidance, the court's corruption could finally be brought to light. Lyra's mark glowed faintly. It was not a threat. It was a signal of the balance shifting, of the power of truth overcoming deception. She raised her hands again, and slowly, deliberately, she began to weave her presence through the room. The courtiers felt it, though they could not see it. A subtle command, a call to humility and honesty. One by one, they sank to their knees before the king, not out of fear, but in recognition of the truth Lyra had revealed. The king's eyes widened. He had never seen such power in action, nor such courage in any subject. He rose from his throne, his armor glinting in the light, and studied her. "You have done more than I imagined, Lyra, but know this, the court will not forgive easily. Those who plotted in shadows will seek revenge." Lyra nodded. "I expected nothing less, Your Majesty. But the people will see truth now, and corruption will no longer hide in darkness." A tense silence followed. Then, suddenly, the doors of the hall creaked open. A messenger entered, breathless, clutching a folded parchment. He handed it to King Eric, who opened it slowly. His eyes widened as he read. "Lyra," he said, his voice low, this names someone I trusted completely as a traitor. Someone close to me has been plotting against the kingdom all along." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "And now, Your Majesty, we face the real test. The corruption was only the beginning. The shadows that lingered in your court have allies outside, and they will not stop until they regain power." The room felt colder, darker, as the weight of the revelation settled in. Lyra's mark pulsed more brightly, sensing the danger that approached. She could feel the shadows stretching, reaching for control, but she also felt the strength within her, a determination to protect the kingdom and the king she had come to respect. King Eric stepped forward, placing a hand on the arm of his throne. "Then we face it together," he said quietly. "Whatever comes, we will act. We will not be defeated by shadows, no matter how cunning or powerful." Lyra looked at him, a spark of respect and something deeper in her gaze. "Together," she agreed. She understood now that their alliance was not just political, it was personal. Their fates were intertwined, their strength enhanced by trust and courage. That night, as the palace slept, Lyra stood by the balcony overlooking the city. The lights of Erendor glimmered below, but she could sense the danger approaching. Somewhere in the shadows, those loyal to corruption were gathering, plotting, waiting for the right moment to strike. Her mark pulsed again, a quiet reminder that her power was needed. She clenched her fists, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the thrill of purpose. She was no longer merely a prisoner. She was a force of change, a symbol of courage, a challenge to anyone who dared to manipulate the kingdom for selfish gain. King Eric appeared beside her silently. He did not touch her, but his presence was strong and steady, a silent promise that he would stand with her. They gazed over the city together, understanding that the next steps would be dangerous, that the true battle had only just begun. Cliffhanger, somewhere deep within the palace, Gavrin and his allies met in secret. "She cannot succeed," Gavrin whispered. "Her power grows with every act of truth. We must strike before she exposes everything, before she destroys us all." Outside, Lyra's mark pulsed bright, sensing the gathering danger. The night was not safe, and the kingdom's fate hung on the edge of a blade. The air in Erendor's palace was thick with tension. The shadows that had lingered in the court for so long were no longer hidden. They moved openly, plotting, whispering, and waiting for a moment of weakness. Lyra could feel them pressing closer, their energy a dark weight that pulled at the edges of her mind. Her mark pulsed faintly on her wrist, warning her of danger, but also reminding her of the strength she carried within. King Eric stood at her side, silent but alert. The court had begun to trust Lyra, seeing the courage she had shown in exposing corruption, but even those loyal to the king were uneasy. The air of suspense was nearly unbearable, as if the entire palace held its breath. "The shadows are stronger than I imagined," Lyra said softly, her eyes scanning the hall. "They are not just among the court, they have allies we cannot yet see." Eric's gaze was steady. "Then we will confront them," he said. "We will not wait for them to strike first. This kingdom will not fall under deceit and fear." Lyra nodded. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the knowledge that the final challenge was upon them. She had prepared for weeks, uncovering lies, discovering the truth, and testing her abilities. Yet she knew that the coming confrontation would demand everything she had: her courage, her skill, and her unwavering will. The night deepened, and the palace grew quiet. Only the distant flicker of torches and the faint murmur of wind outside could be heard. Lyra moved through the halls with Eric close behind, their steps silent but deliberate. The shadows were near, she could feel them, and she could sense the presence of the one who had orchestrated so much deceit, the chief advisor Gavrin. They reached the council chamber, where the last of the conspirators had gathered. Gavrin stood at the center, his expression a mask of confidence, though a faint tremor betrayed his fear. The room was dark, but Lyra's mark glowed softly, illuminating her face and arms with a faint silver light. "You have come far, Lyra," Gavrin said, his voice calm but edged with anger. "But you cannot stop what has already begun. The kingdom will fall and you will fail." Lyra stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "You have failed already, Gavrin. Your lies, your treachery, they are exposed. You underestimated the courage of those who refused to bow to shadows." Eric drew his sword, the steel gleaming faintly in the dim light. "Your schemes end tonight," he said. "You have betrayed me, my court, and the people. There will be justice." Gavrin sneered, but he knew the truth of Eric's words. His power relied on secrecy, and that secrecy had been shattered. The other conspirators shifted uneasily, realizing that they had misjudged Lyra and Eric. Lyra lifted her hand slightly, and a subtle energy pulsed from her mark. It was not destructive, it was clarifying, revealing the darkness within the room. Shadows that had lingered in hidden corners were drawn into the light, powerless against the truth she commanded. Gavrin and his allies found themselves unable to move, as if the very floor beneath them refused their treachery. "You see," Lyra said softly, "power hides in truth, and lies cannot stand where courage and honesty are strong." Eric stepped closer to her, his presence steady and reassuring. "Are you ready?" he asked. Lyra nodded. Together they moved forward, confronting Gavrin and the conspirators. The final struggle was not one of swords or violence alone, it was a battle of will. Lyra's mark pulsed brighter with every word she spoke, every truth she revealed, and every act of courage she displayed. The conspirators faltered, their confidence crumbling under the weight of the truth. Gavrin's magic, once hidden and feared, could not withstand the clarity and strength Lyra brought. One by one, he and his allies were forced to kneel, acknowledging the errors of their actions and the strength of those they had tried to deceive. The court watched in awe, seeing the balance of power shift completely. Lyra, once a prisoner in chains, now stood as a beacon of justice, courage, and wisdom. She had changed not only the court but the very rhythm of the kingdom. King Eric approached her, his eyes softened. He had watched her face danger without fear, expose lies without hesitation, and wield her strength with responsibility and clarity. He reached out, placing a hand near hers, not in command but in respect and solidarity. "You have done more than I could have imagined," he said quietly. "You have restored truth to this court and strength to this kingdom. I have underestimated you, and perhaps myself as well." Lyra looked at him, understanding the meaning behind his words. "We have done this together," she said softly. "Your trust, your majesty, gave me the chance to act, and I never doubted that the kingdom could be saved if we stood with courage and honesty." Eric smiled faintly, a rare softness in his stern expression. "Then the kingdom owes you more than I can say, and I owe you my respect and something more." The palace, once filled with shadows of fear and treachery, now breathed with a sense of relief and renewal. The people of Erendor would be protected, their lives no longer manipulated by corrupt advisors or hidden magic. Lyra's role as a catalyst had brought balance back to the kingdom, and her mark glowed faintly, no longer a symbol of hidden power, but of clarity and transformation. As the night wore on, Lyra and Eric walked through the halls together. The court had been cleansed of deceit, the conspirators humbled, and the kingdom safe for now. Yet Lyra knew that power was never truly gone, that the balance of truth and shadows would always require vigilance. Eric stopped at a balcony overlooking the city. The lights of Erendor shimmered in the distance, calm and peaceful, yet alive with possibility. Lyra joined him, her presence steady, her gaze focused. "The kingdom is safe tonight," she said quietly, "but the world is not always so forgiving. We must be ready for what comes next." Eric nodded. "Together," he said, placing his hand lightly near hers. "We face it together, whatever comes." Lyra felt a warmth at his words, a trust, a bond forged through trials, courage, and shared struggle. She realized that their connection was more than alliance. It was understanding, respect, and a subtle but undeniable bond that had grown stronger with every challenge. As they stood together, the mark on her wrist pulsed faintly one last time, as if acknowledging the completion of one chapter and the beginning of another. Shadows still lingered in the world beyond Erendor, but Lyra knew that with courage, wisdom, and unity, darkness could be met and faced without fear. The night was quiet, but the pulse of life, truth, and justice filled the palace. The kingdom had been transformed, and so had Lyra. From a prisoner in chains, she had become a force of light and change. The people would remember her courage, and the king would remember the lessons she had taught him. That strength is not only in power, but in honesty, integrity, and fearlessness in the face of darkness. Cliffhanger. As the first light of dawn touched the palace towers, Lyra felt a new pulse from her mark, a faint ripple of magic, subtle yet undeniable. Though the court's corruption had ended and the immediate danger was gone, she knew that destiny had more in store. Shadows may rise again, challenges may return, and new truths may emerge. Yet for now, she and King Eric stood together, ready to face whatever came next, their bond stronger, their resolve unbroken, and their hearts aligned in purpose and courage.